with a lot of things and everything else. Well, I mean, we would do tests like we do even pour Freon on the blocks sometimes. There was a couple times when we would take a steaming hot engine without any water in it, and then we would pour Freon on it. Okay, dip it in the cold water. Crack. That's one of the reasons why Rolls-Royce and Renault and my engine people, why my tractors and my trucks and my engines were so well sought after. Like I said, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, they call it, I changed it to Rolls-Royce Merlin or whatever, because I was magical engine, because it was so powerful. But realistically, it's LS and Renault and all of us in Germany and Britain and also some Chinese as well. Like I said, my teams, I know my teams. We, as we expanded out into, and we even had some women of Russia. These plumpy, larger women, which would sew all day and sew all night, and basically made the uniforms for the Russian Guard or whatever, the Russian military. Their sons, basically. Like I said, I thought it was a really nice thing that they did. They worked really hard and they banded together and they made a bunch of uniforms. They weren't exactly perfect. They were a little bit, motherly love. But, they just needed some better equipment, which I think I gave them like $1,000 or $2,000 or something like that, rubles or something like that, because these women, they all got together, 5,000 of them, or 1,000 of them or something like that, and they were sewing like crazy to make nice, good uniforms for their sons. So their sons could go and be in the military or whatever, and I thought it was really nice of them. And so I actually eventually ended up employing them and actually gave them quite a bit of grant money from my rubles or whatever to rubies, really. I had rubies in Russia. So I sold some of the rubies and gave them the money from it to basically make uniforms and clothes for the men of Russia and the daughters, too, of Russia. So because I wanted my people in Russia to look really nice and really elegant. Like I said, anywhere my people were, I wanted my people to look prim and proper. Like even length collars, even length everything in shape and even and perfect. Like I said, we're creating a legacy. Oh, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, aren't I? This is about the Kamov 26 helicopter. There's just so much about my legacy. Anyway, though, a lot of people would make these mistakes of the fact that they just turn off my equipment or turn off the equipment. They just finish whatever they're doing and then they just turn it off. Like, all right, time to go, and that creates flash cooling and all kinds of problems. The heat goes up into the heads. I mean, it's not so much of a problem nowadays because we have better steel and better metal, but back in the old days, it was a real problem. And we would always tell people, did you let it cool off? And they would say, well, no, so most of the time. And that's why I'd even pay my truckers and my aircraft people. I'd be like, I'm paying you for 5 minutes. I want you to let it cool down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And they would sit there and they would just idle the helicopter. So, I mean, when they get in the helicopter, they would warm it up for at least 15 minutes. Let it sit there and just idle, waiting for 15 minutes. And then when they get done with whatever they're doing, they would go and land it, and they'd just sit there for another 15 or 20 minutes, and then shut it off. And that lets everything get all nice and cool, or cool it as cool as it's going to get, and then you can shut it off, because those things get up to 5,000 degrees, or at least a couple hundred degrees. I mean, there's a lot of temperature up in there, and then people would come back to me, and they would say, well, I cracked a head, and it's like, oh, did you let it cool off? Well, no. Fine, we'll give you another head, but we'll give you another cylinder head, but we'll guarantee it this time. But if you do it again, you're not guaranteed. This is the last time I'm guaranteed a head. We'd usually smile and do one at least warranty. If they had a problem with something like that, we would usually guarantee at least one and say, well, maybe it's our fault. Maybe it was a Friday, and we slide the head across the table. Like I say, that's another reason. There's a lot of reasons why people looked after LS and wanted to get my engines and my aircraft, because, they knew what we did. we ran, like I said, we created, for the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, we created a dolly, a gimbal, so we could rotate the engine like this, vertical, we could rotate it upside down, we could rotate it on the left side, we could rotate it on the right side, we could put it at all these weird angles, and we had fuel and everything going to the engine, so the engine, and a dyno, so it wasn't just idling at these weird angles. It was under full power, like we're at full power, right? Okay, now let's wiggle it, and let's rotate it. So they would rotate it at full power into all these weird angles, and we would see if there's any problem. Oil upside down on the pistons at full power. Is that a problem? Anyway, we would actually do that where we'd have oil just drip onto the pistons, and we'd be running it full power upside down, going. We'd see how long it would last. So anyway, and we would even take a shotgun, or a cannon, a 30 millimeter cannon on the Rolls-Royce engine, and I'd be like, okay, now shoot the head. Run it until it quits. Pistons. It makes a mess, like oil going everywhere, like oil is everywhere all over the garage. There's actually film of this. They roll film on this because it's part of the prosperity of what was LS, what was Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, because I wanted to show people what we did to these engines. We exploded them, we detonated one cylinder, we did everything. We punished them as hard as they could possibly be punished, and before we gave them to the market. And like I said, we couldn't make enough Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Like once people saw what we did and how we tested them so well, pilots would be like, I won't fly anything else other than a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. I mean, they didn't even want the Lycoming engine. Like, they couldn't sell Lycoming engines. Once they saw what my Rolls-Royce Merlin engines went through, how we blew off, so how we shot them with the 30 millimeter cannon, how we ran them without water, and we were trying to, back in 1918, we were trying to figure out ways that the engines wouldn't need coolant. And stuff like that, and that's really where that began. Really, was in 1920 or so. I was like, well, what if they run out of coolant? That was one of the tests that we used to do to the engines: is slice the radiator hose open, let all the water come out, and then run it as far as it can go. Okay, let's see if we can make it last a little longer. Anyway, like I say, I had enough money and clout or power that basically, I could demand anything, and my people were, and besides, it's like, what else you got to do? And so they just kept messing around with it, messing around with it. I mean, we had a war in between and some other stuff that happened, but basically, my little researchers and my people in the back always were working hard to invent new things and better things and all that other stuff, like Germans and other people. Like I said, later on, JFK and Nixon and some other people tried to kidnap and even kill my people. Like I say, the black people, Mr. Brown, Mr. Harlem and Wolf, they wanted to kidnap and kill my people. My wonderful, beautiful researchers that work so hard, the females and males of my department, and my people that invented the armor-piercing rounds and armor. All they saw was how they could kill people, and all we were trying to do was invent new things and better things. Change the world. Anyway, so a lot of bad things happened. And I say there were a lot of Japanese that were killed, a lot of Chinese, a few Americans, actually probably quite a few Americans. They might have had bad leadership. Nixon was a horrible, horrible person. So was JFK. So was Mr. Brown and the leader of the Faces of Africa. They're all murderers and wife beaters and killers. The worst people, the worst humanity had to offer. And that's unfortunate. I said all we in Germany and Britain and other places wanted to do was just invent and build better things. I didn't want to become the person of war. I was a pacifist. But when you see enough of your people die or be tortured, you start to take action. That's what I did. Like I said, my cannons were for digging, for blasting rock. And I had to use them to blast people. Anyway. Oh well.